The New York ska jazz ensemble with Boogie Stop Shuffle. It's from their 2009 album, Step Forward. This is Lead Stories. I'm Utrice Leid. And yes, we have crossed the so called Rubicon with the House Judiciary Committee uh, finalizing two charges, finally, of against Donald Trump, and this is in line with the effort to seek his impeachment. He is now officially charged with abusing his power as president and obstructing Congress. Well, it took a while, but in the scheme of things, it really didn't. These things take a long, long time. There are all kinds of questions now that are reverberating because people are asking in Washington, two charges? That's it? We'll see. That's what they've come up with. So now these charges get to be voted on again before they go to the Senate for what essentially is a kind of trial. This vote is like an indictment. It's just a charge, or these are just the charges against the president. And then it moves to the Senate where the real music begins. And that is the formal trial takes place there. Frankly, I just don't get it with all of this going on. It's a lot that went on, a lot of fury, a lot of, a lot of anxiety, a lot of uh, people out of joint, as it would be. After all, this is the about the impeachment of a president. It's only happened three times in U.S. history. And we are in a historic moment, as I remarked before. So we have to observe. We observing, we seeing what they're doing. We don't necessarily have to agree, and we don't necessarily have to approve. But this is the process. So we will observe the process. So reports are saying that by Wednesday of next week, that should happen. The process shifts over to the Senate and the formal trial, as it were, begins. Okay. And that's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to allow the impeachment process today in terms of time. We have been covering it every single day. And today, after all, is Free Your Mind Friday. This is your time. And you use the time, hopefully, very fruitfully, to express your opinions about anything. Just be prepared. Somebody may take you on. 888-874-4888 is the number to call. Eric from Brooklyn, you start us off today.
Hello, Utrice, and hello, everybody.
Thank you. Hello to you.
Um, I just wanted to weigh in on this whole so-called impeachment situation.
Okay.
I think that we have to go back to the so-called Constitution and the Founding Fathers, and we have to recognize that this system that they put in place has been a system that has been against the people and for them to sort out their affairs, right? So we see in this whole proceedings that, like you said yesterday, the people are left out. The vast majority of the people are supposed to have no way to weigh into these deliberations, right? They're supposed to just observe and accept whatever comes out of it. I think that it's such a demeaning attitude towards the people, for especially the Democrats, to pull this kind of stunt, right? We have a situation where we have a sitting vice president or ex-vice president that was criminal in his activities, right? They
Oh,
went and
wait a minute. Wait a minute. Are you talking about Biden?
yes, I'm talking about Biden.
Yes, but
And
you're talking about Biden as if you have proof of what
no,
you're
no, no.
saying. So you
I'm
have to use the
no.
word allegedly, reportedly, because it hasn't been proven that he's a criminal.
Okay. I'm 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 just speaking from my perspective, right? I
Yes,
know they
but
have
even
their rules.
so, you're liable. You can't
Okay. I know
say,
they
you
have
know,
their okay, the criminality that I felt they displayed in their actions, right? That in my opinion, if most of the citizens had done what they did, right, we would be under the jails, in the dungeons. But we can observe what they're doing in government and play by their rules, and that's what allows them to win, right? They create a system of laws that only applies punitively to us and that absolves them. So we're supposed to see what Trump did as criminal, right? So his making a call to find out about, you know, I'll go along with your perspective or your approach with to find out about alleged crime of the previous administration, right? Of the Biden participation in it. We
right?
we know we know that Victoria Nuland talked about them going to Ukraine and basically removing the president, orchestrating a coup, right? How is it okay for Biden to be then in control of Ukraine policy, right? And then have his son exploiting their assets while they're in turmoil, right? So we're supposed to see Trump's phone call as a crime, but $50,000 a month from a
Well,
place that you
actually, they
destroyed
estimate it's between 50 and eighty six
and 80,
thousand
yeah,
dollars.
yeah. I'm going on the low part, just to
You're being
just to be kind
conservative.
of generous, just to be generous to these criminals as I see it, right? We're supposed to see that as something that we should overlook, and this is what these Democrats give us. While they're doing this, using our money, the taxpayer money, they're not going into their bank accounts to orchestrate this sham, right? While they're doing this, they give us a Patriot Act that removes anything that gives us any rights in this country, right? Under the so-called Constitution. How can we allow this and think and look at this as something serious? To me, this is something that they're doing to hush up a volatile president, a president that's given us too much information. And instead of us sitting back and absorbing this information and thinking critically about it, we're getting caught up in the emotionality of it. You can't make an argument, a logical argument, as to why a phone call is equivalent to a complete destruction of a nation and exploiting their assets. So we see this
You
replicated
make a
in
very
Libya.
strong point, and I agree.
Uh-huh.
It is not making sense. The rationale given doesn't make sense. And the Democrats, in my view, still have not answered the question. Biden hasn't answered a question that I think he should be compelled to answer. And an investigation should reveal the answer if he doesn't answer the question. What is his connection to his son's presence on the board of an energy company in, of all places, Ukraine, earning that kind of money. He has never been in that, there's no rational reason that he should be employed there in that capacity, uh, because he has no experience, he has no qualifications, he has no academic qualifications. It all is so transparent, I think, to anybody taking even a cursory look, you would have questions about that. And the questions would lead to was, I mean, the famous quid pro quo. What is the deal here?
Hmm.
And Biden is still denying that his son uh, benefited from his contacts and his position in the United States as vice president. I mean, what are they trying? What do they think people are? Just plain stupid?
This is absolutely what they think. Otherwise, they wouldn't spend the last few years orchestrating this one way or another. They won't spend all this time, and that's why they're going to lose, and that's why Trump is going to win again. And furthermore, another point that I have is: are we to expect that none of these presidents are going to investigate or reveal any of the crimes of the previous governments? So my question is, right? If Trump has any indication that there was crimes committed by the Bidens or the Obamas in Ukraine, right? What is he supposed to
Mhm.
do about it? Is he not supposed to approach the authorities in that country and ask them to investigate what happened in their country? Is he supposed to send our FBI and send the CIA and send all these secret people to flood their country to do their own investigation despite their government? Wouldn't he have to approach their government to find out what crimes took place there? So, in essence, we're putting this situation in a kind of conundrum where if Trump approaches them to find out about criminality, right, that we should want to know about these things, right? If
Yeah,
Trump
but
approaches them, he's screwed, right?
we should
If
also
he
keep in
if he lets
mind
it go,
what this
he's
is
screwed.
revealing. We should
So
also
either
keep in
way,
mind that this is revealing that where the country is right now in terms of its quality of leadership, and it is not unique to the Democrats, it's not unique to the Republicans. They're all doing it. That's the problem.
absolutely. And this is
they're,
why
they're all doing it.
so many people are calling in. So many people that you talk to always want to talk about Trump and Trump and Trump. This has so little to do with Trump, except for the fact that he's such an arrogant. He's so arrogant with his criminality. He's so arrogant with his bombs. He feels like he can just bomb them and take their oil, right?
They
That's his approach.
all have a
That's good
hand
for us.
in the deterioration of the office of the presidency. And because they are dabbling both domestically and overseas in issues and matters that are designed to make them money, them and they and their families. This Hunter
And we
Biden,
can't call it crime.
well, it is
Bombing a
crime.
country
I mean,
with
it
no,
is
it's
crime.
crime.
These are
It's crime.
crimes. When you're talking about quid pro quo and the president basically using the power of his office to hold up military aid to a country until he gets this these are bribes. This is extortion. In the real world, that's what we would be charged with. These are crimes. The the
You see, they
Democrats are
haven't proven.
guilty
They
of
haven't
these things.
proven that though.
And
They haven't
huh?
proven that. They
What?
haven't proven that.
No, they haven't
Sondland
proven it
specifically
because they
said.
haven't conducted a real investigation.
But how many
There's
years have
been
they
no
said?
real
How many years are
investigation
they
into any
supposed?
of these things, really.
But how many years are they supposed to string us along, telling us that this is a crime or that he did a
It's
bribery? They need to prove it. They need to come
well,
up with
I
something that tells us that we can see. We're not idiots. So if you're
well,
going to
here's the
say
thing.
that he committed a crime and you're going to impeach him, you got to
We have
give
to
me
move along.
something
We have to
more than
move
your
along. But
feelings.
I want to say this to you. You're
Hmm.
raising the right questions. but there's very important questions that are absent still. You haven't
Hmm.
talked about the responsibility of the people to insist on getting an answer. You haven't talked about the people have just absented themselves. They
No,
said, "Well,
they've been engaged in
you do the work,
the
and we'll
emotionality.
decide whether we like the answers or we don't like the answers." It is incredible to me that an impeachment is being conducted on the basis of two counts, and they're not criminal in that sense. They're more procedural. The president
They're more
has
moral.
obstructed Congress.
They're more moral.
Okay,
Patrice, why do you insist that they're criminal? Like, I think you're
because
feeding the
I mean,
same thing because they need to prove it. We're
I'm saying
assuming you're
to
saying
you,
libel. We're
if we
libeling.
uh, if we look at this from our perspective, from the people's perspective, obstruction, yes, it is an impeachable crime. Blah 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 blah. The Constitution itself is vague about specifically what kinds of crimes are impeachable. High crimes and misdemeanors. What does that mean? It's never been defined. So the work is also to define what crimes are impeachable. When you have a president being indicted, essentially, or charged with uh, obstruction, well, it doesn't have the full weight as as it ought to have if it's a serious crime. When you just say obstruction, what do you mean by obstruction?
An obstruction of what?
Well, this is what I'm saying. We are all getting snowed, all of us, and they're playing games, and they have been playing games for a while. It's just that who has the advantage at a particular time, they think, in terms of making the case before Congress. But then, even when you get to Congress, uh, it's a matter of bipartisanship. Who is Republican and who is Democrat? When Trump comes before the Senate, it's pure bipartisan warfare. The Republicans are going to stand by him. The Democrats are going to seek to put his lights out. This
And I
is
think it's a
such
sham because they all
not the
agree
way
on the
to do it.
Patriot Act.
But we have to move along.
I
We have
know.
to
I
move along,
appreciate you.
Eric. I want to thank you for calling in and getting us started, especially in such an insightful way. Thank you. Harvey from Berkeley, we haven't talked in a while.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say hello, ultra wonderful Utrice,
How
and
are you doing, Harvey? Ultra wonderful, Harvey.
I appreciate that. Well, on some of your past Lead Stories programs, I've talked about the Republicans' many efforts to take food stamps away from a lot of struggling Americans. And last week, just before the holidays, the Trump administration kicked over 700,000 people off the supplemental nutritional assistance program known as SNAP. This is President Trump's way of saying Merry Christmas and Happy New Year's to us all. And I now believe that I know the real reason why Trump and the Republicans wanted to cut so many poor and unemployed single able-bodied recipients between the ages of 18 and 49 with no dependents from the SNAP program. It's not about food scarcity, because in 2018 the U.S. exported around $159 billion worth of food and beverages, and at the same time current food waste in America is estimated to be at around 30 to 40%. So the question is, why has the Republican Party proceeded with their more than draconian efforts to create widespread food insecurity? First of all, it's my feeling that taking food stamps away from over 700,000 poor and unemployed people will dramatically increase the rates of homelessness across America, because for many of these individuals, it will become a should I buy food or pay the rent issue. And in an article published on July 22nd, 2019, titled Manning the Military, America's Problem, it said that in 1973, President Richard Nixon implemented a all-volunteer force which did away with conscription. So today, only a small portion of Americans have volunteered to serve in the armed forces, and over the past 18 years of endless war, only 1% of the population has been willing to enlist in the military. So in my estimation, the Trump administration is trying to make an end run around the loss of conscription by depriving singled, able-bodied, poor and unemployed 18 to 49-year-old SNAP recipients with no dependents of their basic nutritional needs, so that they will become hungry, homeless, and desperate. Hungry, homeless, and desperate enough to join the armed forces as a ready source of employment and shelter for those unfortunate Americans of lower socioeconomic status with very little or no education. Unfortunately, more than 180 House Democrats joined the nearly united Republican caucus Wednesday night to pass a sweeping $738 billion military spending bill, an increase of $22 billion taxpayer dollars over the 2019 defense budget. Lots of money for war, a lot less money for the poor. Trump says the $22 billion increase in our nation's 2019 defense budget will help to keep America strong. In my estimation, if we really want to keep America strong, we should invest the $22 billion in free education for all Americans, as well as a nationwide single-payer health care program. Another positive investment would be to accelerate America's transition away from climate-destabilizing fossil fuels like coal, oil, methane, and nuclear towards renewable forms of energy like solar, wind, solid-state piezo and thermoelectric production, flywheel energy storage, wave power, geothermal power, and battery storage technology, so that we won't need all of these thousands of extra soldiers patrolling America's streets to control the population when they become climate change refugees. Once again, I want to thank you, Therese, for your many efforts to create a better world for us, our children, and future generations. We all love you very much.
And I want to thank you for a well thought out perspective on the issue, as you always do. You always give us something meaty, if you will, to, let's say veggie meaty. To think about, and thank you for the evident research that you always do and share with us. Thank you.
Thank
and
you,
so
Eugene.
good to hear from you.
My
So
pleasure.
good. Henry from Chicago. What's going on in Chicago?
Hey, Therese, how's it going?
Okay. How's by you?
It's okay. I'm still alive. Still, I guess, healthy.
You're hanging in.
Yes, I'm hanging in. So, greetings to you, along with the PRN and Lead Stories listeners. Hope everybody has a wonderful and productive weekend. I wanted to touch on the issue that you had raised yesterday in regards to the format of your show, in regards to, whether you'll have the community speak or you'll have guests on the show or experts or whatever. But, I've been listening to you for about 5 years now. And I mean, however you want to do the show, I've basically enjoyed almost every show. I mean, yes, you have a wonderful format, whether you have guests or whether you let the listeners speak, because, Therese, I hold you in high regard. I hope you know that. And I think a lot of us do. I consider you one of the great black journalists that I've come across, and you are up there with names like Tony Brown, Gwen Ifill, Ida B. Wells, those type of names that you are, that I hold the standard to. So, and I trust, the format that you whatever format that you have. But, me personally, I like the shows where you kind of either give your own perspective or even rant the whole show without taking any calls. Those are the shows that I love.
You like me ranting?
Yes, yes, I love those shows. Those shows are the best, actually,
Really?
because
Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
because like I said, I respect your opinion. I think your opinion is well thought out of, and this doesn't mean that I agree with everything you say. But the
Yes.
thing is that I respect it because of the fact that you thought it out well and good. And maybe it's just a perspective. Sometimes when I disagree with you, maybe it's because I just didn't see it in the way that you saw it. So it's something that I think that brings out the greatness of your journalism. And two, you have, I mean, honestly, to me, you have the patience of the saint because don't get me wrong, a lot of the callers, I mean, you have some very intelligent callers that call into the show. There are some that I feel like, oh man, I want to hung up on them like long time ago.
No, you can't
But
do that. And I'll tell you why.
I know, and that's why you run the show and I don't.
No, we all in this together. We all learning together. I'm never always right, but I appreciate when people disagree and they have a foundation. They can explain to me what I missed. So we're learning how to use media. By the way, um, as quiet as it's kept, what we do here is not really the norm, and that is relearning how to use media properly and advantageously. And we finding out, you don't just get on and yammer. You got to have something that backs up your research. Something that backs up your opinion. I mean, your research. And we are taking advantage of a space that I think, and my argument is, you're entitled to intellectual space.
Hmm.
So it's not a favor; it's what you're entitled to. But as much we haven't been used to being invited into a public realm to speak our minds. So this is kind of new. People sometimes get a little nervous, and it's understandable. But you'll get used to it as we go along.
But Trace, I want to ask one last thing before I leave because it worries me a little bit because I'm still trying. I'm struggling with this because obviously you expressed to us about 4 years ago, or was it 5 years ago, that you almost died, and
Yes,
you're still here because the creator checked his calendar and said that it's not time for you, Trace, to punch her clock yet.
that's
She
right.
still has some more work to do. But my thing is, I'm struggling to find the next Utrice out here, and I'm very concerned about that because I know we're all not going to be here forever. So I'm very concerned about who is the next Utrice out here because there's very few, if not any, good black journalists out here that can do what you do. Like I said, there were a few names that I mentioned that were in your circle, and they're all dead now. And you're
Yeah,
like one of the last remaining ones. So I'm
and
kind of
I'm
worried about
ahead.
that. I'm very worried about that.
No, this is the whole idea. The whole idea is to create what you need. That's what led me years ago to start a journalism training program. Just regular, ordinary people. And where did they end up? One of the graduates is a spokesperson for the United Nations. One is the news director for New York One. We have lots of. One guy who participated in the program was actually homeless. And on the day he finished, he got on a bus and it took him to Skagway, Alaska. He became the Associated Press correspondent in Alaska.
Hmm.
You know, it's what's possible. And there are many stories like that. Lots of people working at local papers, community papers. in a very important way. So we have to create it ourselves. And I firmly believe that it's not a miracle uh, effort, it is just simply applying yourself. And you develop skills that are transferable to many other areas of endeavor. So we have to create it. We have to create it.
Hmm.
I
Okay.
wish I had more energy at this time. I would start it again. But we had a 93% success rate.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
It it was a tough program. Tough. But my faith was that if it is important to you, you'll get through it. You'll get through it.
Interesting.
The linchpin was, and I have to say this to make a point, a special point. You know what the secret really was? Yes, it's learning journalism and blah, 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 blah. Fine. I had a full time psychotherapist on staff.
Wow.
Yes, indeed. Because people came in convinced they couldn't do this. And it would have become, I should say, a self-fulfilling prophecy. I had to really get into their heads. I would go to their homes. I want to see who's going to take care of your children while you're studying. It was a very intensive project, but completely uh, radical, not at all like any journalism training program.
Hmm.
So that was the secret. I knew we were going to be dealing with people who were beaten down with no faith that they could succeed at anything. What is journalism that, or anything else, any profession that you can't succeed at if you apply yourself?
Mm-hmm.
We have so many examples. We have so many examples in our history of ordinary people, I mean, flying high in an area where they literally taught themselves for the most part. So we have to continue that tradition and use innovative ways to reach people, like we're using this radio space to invite people into a community. That's not normal in media today,
Mm-hmm.
but look how normal it is for you to express yourself, and lots of people are listening to you. That alone would have been enough to make you faint. But you're comfortable. You're comfortable, and you should be comfortable in this public space. I am so happy. I'm always looking forward to hearing what people are saying. What are you thinking? Tell us.
Hmm.
That's the proper use of a medium like this.
I
Thanks,
agree.
Henry, for calling in. I
Thank
hope
you.
you're reasonably warm this weekend in Chicago. Thanks, Patricia. You're on the air from New York.
Good afternoon, Utrice, and good afternoon to the PRN family. I hope all is well.
Hello. How are you doing, Patricia?
Oh, keeping warm here in New York, keeping warm.
Yes, indeed.
I actually wanted to talk today about Brexit and Boris Johnson's overwhelming success and what that means for black and brown Brits and what that says about our space here in the U.S. I was reading on Wednesday because the vote was yesterday, and I read an article online on Wednesday about the concerns that the fear, actually more than concerns, the fear that black and brown Brits had about becoming
Before you
the
go
prime
any
minister.
further, if I could interrupt you a bit, give us a little synopsis of Brexit and why it is important.
Well, maybe about 2 years ago, the policy of separating from the European Union. Right now, Britain is part of the EU, and they want to separate from the European Union. They want to retain their own currency, separate and apart from the other European countries. And so there was a vote that was overwhelming to separate from the EU. And the thought was that vote really was a vote, an anti-immigrant vote. It was a racism vote, pretty much mirrored what was happening here in this country. And so there's been a lot of economic upheaval and a lot of discussion back and forth. As a matter of fact, it tanked Theresa May's tenancy as prime minister, and then Boris Johnson surfaced. He's been lurking in the background. And so this vote was again a referendum on whether the people in Great Britain really did want to secede from the European Union, retain their own currency, the pound, and elect Boris Johnson. But the feeling by black and brown Brits was that Boris Johnson literally was the English version of Donald Trump. As a matter of fact, he has been known to say that the main mistake that Britain made when they left imperialism and left Africa was that they never should have left. That was a mistake that they made. That they actually should have gone back. In other words, retain their imperial control over those countries that Britain had carved out for itself. But the article was talking about the fact that all of these black and brown Brits were saying that if Boris Johnson was successful, that they were going to leave Great Britain. And as I was reading the article, I said, well, where are you going? You certainly can't come to the U.S. because it's just as bad here. And you certainly can't go to Europe because even in all of those very welcoming European countries, Scandinavian countries, they're all experiencing anti-immigrant sentiments, specifically against black and brown people. And so I think the message here was that around the world, we're all experiencing the same agony. We're all experiencing the same vitriol and venom, and we're all in the same boat. And so worldwide, there needs to be a collective response by black and brown people to racism, because you can't run to another country. I guess the only place you can run to right now, I mean, some people were talking about going back to the Caribbean. Well, the Caribbean doesn't have an economy that can sustain you if you run back to it because of what has befallen the economy in Caribbean countries. And you certainly can't go to Africa, because if you're going to go into the big African cities, there's no work, which means there's no place for us to go. So wherever we are, we're going to have to struggle from wherever we are.
Good point. So what do you think is the immediate future of this concept that you just raised, that people come to the notion or to come to realize that wherever you are, you have to struggle?
Well, I think, number one, there is a fear that they are powerless and that they're powerless to do anything to respond to their condition. And so the first thing they've got to do is say, wait a minute, I am not powerless. I can respond. Now, I may have to join forces with others, and that's where the concept of a worldwide response comes in. But people have to stop feeling as though they are powerless. They have no control over their lives.
And that is central to oppression, isn't it?
It most definitely is.
You can't change anything, not even the smallest thing in your life, because somebody else is pulling the strings. That's the psychological issue, and I understand it really well. I just talked about it with regard to the journalism training program. I knew I was going to be dealing with people who internalized oppression to the point where it would impede success with anything that they try. They will not succeed.
You know, it's interesting. I went to see the movie Harriet over the weekend because, as you know, I'm a midwife, and within my own professional organization, we're dealing with this. And you know, my message, I'm gonna send out a message to the black and brown midwives that even during Harriet Tubman's time, she recognized that she had power over herself, and she could help those who recognized that they wanted to be free. She couldn't help everybody because not everybody recognized that freedom was within their grasp. So she addressed those who said, "I can do it and I will be free," and those who didn't feel that, she left them. They were left behind. But you first got to know that you can be free, that freedom is within your grasp.
And you owe it to yourself to make an investment in yourself. And the first investment is believing in yourself and valuing yourself enough to fight for yourself. Thanks, Patricia. Always a pleasure to talk with you, and glad that you called in today. Gwen from New York, you're on the air.
Hi, Utrice.
Hello.
How are you? Hello.
Hello.
Oh, it's good to hear you. I'm really riveted by everything everyone is saying, and I just wanted to make a couple of points as well. You know, I do think that even though they're going to not be able to impeach the president, I do think that it was very important to do something, because to allow him to continue to get away with what he gets away with, and just always stand back and say, you know, that's okay, and identify it, I think that's really troubling for most of the people. That's like letting somebody constantly steal and, you know, never holding them responsible for that. Now, as far as what he did,
but hold on a minute, Gwen. Why do you say you don't expect the impeachment will go through? You don't expect it.
Because it was so, I listened to almost all of it, and it was so unbelievably partisan, and it was maneuvered in such a way that the Republicans, this really, really helped the Republicans, by the way, because what the Republicans were able to do, and I was really, I don't really know how an impeachment proceeding goes, but I'm pretty sure in like a regular court of law that if you're talking about apples, you have to stay focused on apples. You can't start bringing in peaches. And even though Joe Biden's son may have or may not have done something wrong, that was not the place for this to be, because that was not on the radar. What was on the radar was it could have been anyone in any country that President Trump called and said, "Can you do an investigation on this particular person?" It didn't have to be Joe Biden. It could have been anyone. But
you understand that to be a diversion, don't you?
The Joe Biden
whole
thing?
Biden issue being raised was a diversionary tactic.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why they were raising it. And it was very good, because what they were able to do is basically destroy Joe Biden's credibility during this forum, because if you were listening to it, you were saying, holy cow. Now, I knew about the Joe Biden thing about 6 months ago, but I didn't know it as deeply as I got an understanding of it yesterday, if what they're saying is true. But either way, if I was a person who never heard of either one of these people, it would be very troubling. So the Republicans were really able to use this time to their advantage to create a scenario that's very damning for Joe Biden. And you know that once this goes further, that the Republicans are going to close this whole thing down, that they're not going to indict, they're not going to impeach Trump. At the end of the day, Trump is going to remain in power, because of the numbers. It's not about whether he was right or wrong. What I found most troubling is that instead of the Congress looking out for the people and saying this man, because these are just a couple of things that he's done. This is not nearly, a full picture of everything he did. In my opinion, I thought they should have let it be a wider spanning scope, but they decided to hone it in and just bring it into these two items. For me, there was much more on the plate, especially with the emoluments clauses. I thought that could have been brought in. However, either way, it doesn't matter because the way the whole thing is shaking out is it's going to only be decided on partisan issues. And the thing that's really bothering to me is that I personally feel that President Trump is a great threat to the United States. And I think that he is as crazy as a loon as we've talked about on this program. And I don't trust him with big contraptions like 5G and nuclear weapons. But either way, that wasn't the point. I mean, there's plenty of things they could have brought up about him. But the other thing I wanted to say was about this telephone call. This wasn't just a telephone call. I want to compare it to this. If somebody went in to rob a bank and said, stick up your hands and give me all your money, and only got that far, but a security guard got behind him and said, that's it, you're not going to do this, and the whole thing was quashed. That man or that woman, whoever did that, would still be brought to court because they were attempting to rob a bank. And that's what I equate this to. So even though Trump did not, get what he wanted, he did attempt to do something that, for all intensive reasons, was either illegal or in pretty bad taste. I mean, for me myself, I think if you want to investigate a person who is living in the United States, then you could go ahead and ask the FBI or the CIA or any of a myriad of places to investigate that person. But to go to another country and ask them to do our bidding, I really find that offensive. But I also find it troubling too, because you're now taking it out of the hands, and he put it in the hands of people that are not elected. Mayor Giuliani is not elected to do anything, and I don't want him doing the bidding on my part.
Not.
So I found that to be, I find that it is a good thing because for such a long time I kept hearing Nancy Pelosi say that they weren't going to do anything about this. And I kept saying, well, it's like having your kid come in and constantly do something wrong and never holding him never holding him responsible for it. Now, as for the Republicans yesterday, this is what I found really distressing. I felt like they were they were rationalizing things that were clearly problematic and wrong and breaking of the law. And they were rationalizing it, or they were outright lying about things, or they were glossing over things that were very, very troubling and will be very troubling and will be very harmful to the United States in the future. If they're harmful now, they'll be harmful in the future. And to me, if you're only going to cover up for somebody because they're of the same party as you are, and this is one thing that I think where the Democrats and the Republicans or the progressives and conservatives really differ. I do find that more progressive people are much more willing to go in and take a look around and examine their closet and to admit when things aren't really, looking so great. I don't find that too often when I'm listening to the Republicans. It seems like no matter what is happening, they're going to stay with that ship until it sinks all the way to the bottom, even at the detriment of all of us. And I think that's what for me was really troubling, to walk away from this, to see that what was more important to them. And I'm sorry, but Trump to talk about Trump and say that he was trying to prevent corruption. Are you kidding me? The man has, on record, proven thousands of lies.
It's meant as a sense of humor.
Corruption, why don't you come to New York and see what he's done here? Or how about traveling to Atlantic City and looking to the barren space of Atlantic City? How about some of those builders that worked for him who never got paid? 2 companies went belly up who never got paid. So please do not tell me that all of a sudden that President Trump had a change in his entire being, and now he is anti-corruption. It is clear why he did what he did. It's clear to me that he got caught, it's okay to go through the impeachment proceedings, because at least, even if they lose, I have a little more confidence that when, that at least somebody will call you out on the carpet. He's going to walk away from this. He's going to be fine. But at least I wanted to see.
You need to wrap up when we're running out of time.
Sure. So I just wanted to put that out there and say to people that I really wish also that people would stop rationalizing it and saying it wasn't really that bad of a thing. It really was that bad of a thing. And so are the other things that he has done. Just because you get away with it doesn't mean it's right. And by the way, if Joe Biden did that and his son did that, it doesn't mean that it's right what they did. And there is a time and a place to take on that as well. So, unfortunately, Joe Biden, I'm sure, is going to lose this race because of what his son was involved with. But, this isn't the forum for it. So thanks for letting me express my opinion today.
Thank you all. It is such an honor for me to be in your company. Thank you. Have a great weekend. We'll see each other on Monday. Bye-bye.